The crisp autumn air of October 2012 in Mount Pleasant, Michigan, was thick with the scent of fallen leaves and the eager anticipation of Halloween. For 24-year-old Rebecca Gay, a hard-working hairstylist and devoted mother, this Halloween held the promise of a joyful night filled with costume trick-or-treaters and the simple pleasure of creating cherished memories with her 3-year-old son, Conway. Rebecca had meticulously decorated her mobile home, transforming it into a festive haven, a testament to her love for her child and her zest for life. She had plans with her fiancé, Aaron Quinn, to ensure Conway had a magical Halloween. Little did she know, this night would become a haunting prelude to a tragedy that would shock the community to its core, a tragedy orchestrated by a man cloaked in the guise of a trusted, spiritual leader. Rebecca Gay was a vibrant young woman, known for her dedication to her son and her aspirations in her professional life. She worked at Borix Hair Care and had recently been promoted to management at the Goodwill store in Mount Pleasant, a testament to her diligence and commitment. She was described as family-oriented, always putting the needs of others before her own, and her positive spirit was an inspiration to those who knew her. Her life was a tapestry woven with love for her son, Conway, and the warmth of her relationships, including her fiancé, Aaron Quinn. She was also connected to the Christ Community Fellowship Church, where she had formed relationships that would tragically intersect with her fate. One of these connections was with John D. White, a pastor at the church, who was also engaged to Rebecca's mother, Sally Gay. White, a man who presented himself as a man of God, had a history that belied his spiritual facade. Unknown to many, White was an ex-convict with a disturbing past, including prior convictions for assault with intent to murder and manslaughter. He had served time for killing a 26-year-old woman in Kalamazoo County in 1994, a crime for which he was released in 2007 after serving a significant portion of his sentence. This dark chapter in his life, however, would not be his last. As Halloween night approached, the sense of normalcy and joy that Rebecca Gay cherished was about to be shattered. She was unaware that a sinister plan was unfolding, conceived in the mind of the very man who was a part of her extended family and spiritual community. The night of October 31, 2012 began like any other Halloween, with the promise of candy, costumes, and childhood wonder. But for Rebecca, it would tragically mark the end of her life, a life extinguished by a twisted fantasy that preyed upon trust and innocence. The investigation that followed would unearth a horrifying truth, revealing the depths of depravity lurking beneath a veneer of piety. The initial moments of Rebecca's disappearance were met with growing concern. When she failed to show up for work at Goodwill and could not be reached, her friends and family grew frantic. Her car was found parked at a local bar, initially leading investigators to explore the possibility of an abduction from that location. However, the truth lay much closer to home, within the very community she was a part of. The investigation soon led authorities to her home, where signs of a struggle were discovered, painting a grim picture of what had transpired. The focus of the investigation inevitably turned to those closest to Rebecca, including her fiancé, Aaron Quinn, and more disturbingly, John D. White. The horrifying reality began to surface when John D. White, the pastor engaged to Rebecca's mother, confessed to the murder. His confession sent shockwaves through the community, revealing a motive so disturbing it defied comprehension, a necrophilic fantasy. White admitted to repeatedly striking Rebecca in the head with a rubber mallet and then strangling her with a zip tie. He also admitted to undressing her body, though he claimed he did not remember if he had acted upon his fantasy of having sex with her corpse. This confession, chilling in its depravity, exposed the monstrous secret held by a man who had preached about righteousness and salvation. The discovery of Rebecca's body in a wooded area, about a mile from her mobile home, brought a somber closure to the immediate search, but amplified the profound sense of grief and betrayal. The image of Rebecca Gay, a young mother with her whole life ahead of her, cut short in such a brutal and perverse manner, left an indelible scar on the community. The events of that Halloween night served as a grim reminder that evil can wear the most unexpected masks, and that sometimes the greatest dangers lurk in the most trusted of places. As the investigation deepened, it became clear that John D. White's past was a critical element in understanding how such a tragedy could occur. His history of violence against women, including a prior manslaughter conviction, raised serious questions about the effectiveness of the justice system and the parole process that allowed him to re-enter society. The narrative of Rebecca Gay's life, so full of promise and love, was tragically overshadowed by the depravity of her killer. This was not just a murder, it was a betrayal of trust, a perversion of faith, and a stark warning about the hidden darkness that can exist within seemingly ordinary lives. The immediate aftermath of John D. White's confession was a maelstrom of shock, disbelief, and profound grief. The community of Mount Pleasant, still reeling from the initial news of Rebecca Gay's disappearance, was now confronted with the gruesome details of her murder and the chilling motive behind it. The man they knew, the pastor who spoke of God's love and forgiveness, was revealed to be a predatory killer, harboring a depraved obsession. This stark contrast between White's public persona and his private darkness cast a long shadow, forcing many to question the very foundations of trust and faith. As investigators pieced together the events of that fateful Halloween night, a more detailed picture of White's actions began to emerge. His confession, while horrifying, provided crucial insights into the sequence of events. He admitted to having lured Rebecca to his home under the pretense of a spiritual discussion or some form of counseling, a manipulative tactic that exploited her trust and her connection to the church. Once inside his residence, the atmosphere of supposed spiritual solace quickly devolved into a scene of brutal violence. White, consumed by his twisted desires, attacked Rebecca, initially with a rubber mallet, striking her repeatedly. The ferocity of the assault was evident in the injuries Rebecca sustained. The violence did not end with the initial blows. White then proceeded to strangle Rebecca with a zip tie, a brutal and impersonal method that underscored the calculated nature of his actions. The act of strangulation, a slow and terrifying process, speaks volumes about the killer's intent and the complete lack of mercy he displayed. Following the murder, White engaged in further desecrating acts. He admitted to undressing Rebecca's body, a detail that highlighted the necrophilic nature of his fantasy, even if he claimed to not fully remember acting upon it. This admission alone was enough to send shivers down the spines of those who heard it, painting a disturbing portrait of a man driven by unimaginable perversions. The disposal of Rebecca's body was a critical part of the investigation. White led authorities to a wooded area approximately a mile from Rebecca's mobile home, where he had concealed her remains. The discovery of her body was a somber confirmation of their worst fears, and a necessary step in bringing a measure of closure to Rebecca's grieving family and friends. The location of the body suggested an attempt to conceal his crime, a futile effort against the relentless pursuit of justice. Each detail uncovered served to deepen the horror and the sense of injustice that permeated the case. The focus then shifted to the legal proceedings against John D. White. The prosecution's case was built upon White's own confession, which provided a direct admission of guilt. However, the defense's strategy often involves challenging the validity of confessions or seeking to mitigate the severity of the charges through various legal arguments. In White's case, his history of violence became a significant point of contention. Prosecutors argued that his past convictions, particularly for assault with intent to murder and manslaughter, demonstrated a pattern of violent behavior and a propensity for extreme violence, which supported the severity of the charges. The legal battle was not just about proving White's guilt, but also about understanding the full scope of his disturbing psychology. The necrophilic motive, while repulsive, was a key element in the prosecution's argument for the depravity of the crime. It illustrated a level of intent and cruelty that went beyond a simple act of passion or rage. The defense, on the other hand, might have attempted to argue for diminished capacity or other mitigating factors, though the strength of White's confession and the physical evidence made such arguments challenging. The revelation of John D. White's criminal past, including his prior conviction for killing a woman in 1994, raised critical questions about the parole system and its effectiveness. Released in 2007, less than 5 years before Rebecca's murder, questions arose about whether he had truly been rehabilitated or if he had merely been waiting for another opportunity to inflict harm. This aspect of the case resonated deeply with the public, sparking discussions about public safety and the responsibility of the justice system to protect citizens from repeat offenders. The fact that he had been able to integrate himself into a church community, gaining the trust of its members, including Rebecca's mother, added another layer of betrayal to an already complex and devastating narrative. The investigation also delved into the relationship between Rebecca Gay and John D. White. While Rebecca was engaged to Aaron Quinn, her mother, Sally Gay, was engaged to White. This complex familial connection meant that White was an almost constant presence in Rebecca's life, a figure of authority and supposed guidance. The prosecution would have sought to establish the nature of their interactions, looking for any signs of coercion, manipulation, or abuse that might have preceded the murder. The trust Rebecca placed in White, stemming from his role as a spiritual leader and her mother's fiancé, made his betrayal all the more heinous. As the legal process moved forward, the media played a significant role in disseminating information about the case. The graphic details of White's confession and his disturbing motive captured public attention, turning the Rebecca Gay murder case into a national headline. The coverage, while shedding light on the tragedy, also highlighted the complex interplay between crime, justice, and the public's fascination with dark and disturbing events. The narrative of Rebecca's life, so tragically cut short, became intertwined with the chilling story of her killer, a story that continued to unfold with each new revelation. The unraveling truth of Rebecca Gay's murder was a painful and slow process, revealing layers of deceit, manipulation, and unspeakable violence. It was a story that challenged the community's sense of security and forced them to confront the darkest aspects of human nature. The legal proceedings that followed would be a test of the justice system's ability to hold a dangerous individual accountable and to provide a measure of justice for Rebecca and her loved ones. The legal proceedings against John D. White following his confession were a crucial phase in the Rebecca Gay murder case. The weight of his admission, coupled with the disturbing details of his motive, placed immense pressure on the justice system to deliver a swift and just outcome. The prosecution, armed with White's confession and the evidence gathered, moved towards securing a conviction and imposing a sentence that reflected the heinous nature of his crime. The community, still grappling with the shock and grief, awaited the final verdict with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. In the courtroom, the gravity of White's actions was laid bare. The prosecution meticulously presented the evidence, emphasizing the brutality of the murder and the depravity of White's necrophilic fantasy. His confession served as the cornerstone of their case, a direct admission that left little room for doubt regarding his guilt. The details of Rebecca's final moments, as described by White, painted a grim picture of his calculated violence and the complete disregard he had for human life. The jury's task was to consider this evidence and deliver a verdict that acknowledged the immense suffering inflicted upon Rebecca and her loved ones. The legal strategy employed by the prosecution focused on highlighting White's history of violence as evidence of his dangerous propensity. His prior convictions for assault with intent to murder and manslaughter were presented not just as background information, but as a crucial indicator of his character and his capacity for extreme violence. The argument was that White had demonstrated a pattern of behavior, and his release from prison in 2007 had provided him with another opportunity to commit a horrific crime. This history underscored the urgency for a severe sentence to ensure public safety. The defense, while facing an uphill battle given the confession, likely attempted to mitigate the charges or argue for a lesser sentence. However, the nature of White's crime, particularly the disturbing necrophilic motive, made it difficult to evoke significant leniency. The prosecution's aim was to secure a conviction for first-degree murder, the most serious charge, which would carry the harshest penalties. The focus was on proving premeditation and malice aforethought, elements that were strongly supported by the confession and the method of murder. Ultimately, John D. White was found guilty of first-degree murder in the death of Rebecca Gay. The verdict was a significant moment, acknowledging the truth of what had happened and providing a legal pronouncement of guilt. However, the sentencing phase was equally critical, as it determined the punishment White would face. Given the severity of the crime and the clear evidence of premeditation and depravity, the prosecution sought the maximum penalty allowed by law. The court sentenced John D. White to life in prison without the possibility of parole. This sentence meant that White would spend the remainder of his natural life incarcerated, a measure intended to protect society from his dangerous tendencies and to serve as a severe punishment for his horrific actions. The sentence was a culmination of the legal battle, bringing a form of legal closure to the case, though the emotional scars for Rebecca's family and friends would undoubtedly endure. While the sentencing brought a legal resolution, it did not erase the profound questions that lingered in the wake of Rebecca Gay's murder. One of the most pressing questions revolved around John D. White's past and the justice system's handling of his previous crimes. His release in 2007, after serving a significant portion of his sentence for a previous homicide, raised concerns about recidivism and the accuracy of rehabilitation assessments. How could a man with such a violent history be released back into society only to commit another brutal murder? This question echoed in the minds of many, prompting discussions about the effectiveness of parole boards and the need for more stringent measures to identify and manage high-risk offenders. The role of the church community also came under scrutiny. White had managed to integrate himself into the Christ Community Fellowship Church, even becoming engaged to Rebecca's mother. This allowed him access to vulnerable individuals and opportunities to exploit trust. The case highlighted the potential for religious institutions to be exploited by individuals with malicious intent, and the importance of vetting individuals in positions of spiritual leadership. It raised questions about how such predators can infiltrate communities and the measures that religious organizations can take to prevent such occurrences. Furthermore, the psychological aspect of White's motive, his necrophilia, continued to be a subject of morbid fascination and deep concern. While the legal system had punished him for the act of murder, the underlying psychological pathology remained a disturbing element of the case. Understanding such extreme deviance is a complex challenge, and while it doesn't excuse the crime, it points to the darker corners of human psychology that can lead to unthinkable acts. Rebecca Gay's story became a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of the unpredictable nature of evil and the devastating consequences when trust is betrayed. Her life, vibrant and full of potential, was tragically extinguished by a man who hid his monstrous intentions behind a facade of piety. The legal battle may have concluded with a sentence of life imprisonment, But the search for complete understanding and the lingering questions about how such a tragedy could occur would continue to haunt those touched by this devastating case. The sentencing of John D. White to life in prison without parole marked a significant milestone in the Rebecca Gay murder case, bringing a measure of legal closure to a tragedy that had deeply scarred the Mount Pleasant community. However, the conclusion of the legal proceedings did not signify an end to the impact of Rebecca's death. Her legacy, though tragically overshadowed by the horrific manner of her passing, began to take shape through the efforts of her loved ones and the broader societal reflections spurred by the case. The story of Rebecca Gay became more than just a sensational crime report. It evolved into a narrative that touched upon themes of loss, resilience, and the enduring quest for justice. Rebecca's family and friends, devastated by their loss, channeled their grief into advocating for change and honoring Rebecca's memory. They became voices for victims of violence, working to raise awareness about the dangers posed by individuals with violent histories and the importance of robust systems to protect the public. Their efforts focused on ensuring that Rebecca would not be forgotten, and that her life, though cut short, would serve as a catalyst for positive change. This involved supporting legislative initiatives aimed at strengthening criminal justice practices and advocating for increased resources for victim support services. The case brought to the forefront critical discussions about the effectiveness of the justice system, particularly concerning parole and the monitoring of convicted felons. John D. White's prior conviction for manslaughter and his release from prison just a few years before Rebecca's murder highlighted the complex challenges of recidivism. The questions surrounding how he was able to re-enter society and subsequently commit another horrific crime prompted a closer examination of the parole process, risk assessment tools, and post-release supervision. There was a palpable desire to prevent similar tragedies from befalling other families. Furthermore, the disturbing nature of White's motive, necrophilia, sparked conversations about the psychological complexities of violent crime. While legal systems focus on punishment for the act, the underlying psychological pathologies that drive such extreme behaviors remain a subject of intense study and concern. The Rebecca Gay case served as a grim reminder of the depths to which some individuals can sink, prompting deeper societal engagement with mental health issues and the need for comprehensive approaches to understanding and addressing violent tendencies. The Christ Community Fellowship Church, where White had been a member and engaged to Rebecca's mother, also faced introspection. The case revealed how individuals with nefarious intentions could infiltrate seemingly safe communities, exploiting trust and religious affiliation. This led to discussions within religious organizations about vetting processes for leadership positions, the importance of vigilance, and the need to create environments that are both welcoming and secure. The betrayal experienced by members of the church community, including Rebecca's mother, was profound, and the path to healing involved confronting these difficult truths. Rebecca Gay's son, Conway, represented the most poignant and enduring aspect of her legacy. As he grew, his mother's memory became a guiding force. Efforts were made by her family to ensure that Conway understood the loving mother he had lost, and to provide him with a supportive environment in which he could process his trauma and build a positive future. The hope was that he would grow up to live a life filled with the love and joy that Rebecca had so deeply cherished and embodied. The media coverage surrounding the case, while sensational at times, also played a role in shaping public perception and disseminating information about the broader issues at play. Documentaries, news reports, and online discussions kept Rebecca's story alive, serving as a constant reminder of the crime and its implications. This continued attention helped to maintain pressure for accountability and served as an educational tool for the public, raising awareness about domestic violence, predatory behavior, and the vulnerabilities that exist within society. In the years following the sentencing, the Rebecca Gay murder case became a reference point in discussions about criminal justice reform, victim advocacy, and the complexities of human psychology. Her name became synonymous with a tragedy that exposed the dark underbelly of deception and the devastating consequences of unchecked malevolence. While the pain of her loss would never fully dissipate, the efforts to honor her memory and learn from the profound lessons of her case aim to create a safer and more just world. Rebecca's story, a testament to a life tragically cut short, ultimately served as a powerful call to action, urging communities to remain vigilant, to support victims, and to relentlessly pursue justice in the face of unimaginable evil. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the Rebecca Gay murder case. If you found this deep dive into the investigation, legal proceedings, and lasting impact insightful, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more in-depth explorations of true crime stories. Your engagement helps us continue to bring these important narratives to light and support the pursuit of justice.